I arrived at Marcus's mansion expecting Thanksgiving warmth, but walked into a nightmare instead. Around the opulent dining table, my millionaire son proudly announced to everyone how generous he was, providing me with a luxurious $7,500 monthly pension for comfortable retirement. The words crushed me like a sledgehammer. I sat frozen, watching him bask in admiration from relatives praising his family devotion. But I knew the devastating truth. I hadn't received a single penny from Marcus in over 2 years. My own son was using me as a prop for his fake generosity while I struggled alone. Don't forget to subscribe. The mansion's iron gates felt like a warning I should have heeded. My beat-up Honda looked ridiculous in Marcus's circular driveway, parked between a BMW and a Tesla like a homeless man at a country club. I pulled down the visor mirror and checked my reflection one last time. The shirt was my best one, pressed twice this morning, but it still carried the faint smell of disinfectant from my security guard shifts. The small gift bag in my passenger seat contained a book about fishing. $23 I couldn't afford, but it was Thanksgiving. Family was supposed to matter. I walked up the marble steps, each one echoing louder than my heartbeat. Through the tall windows, I could see people laughing, holding wine glasses that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. My son's world, a world where I had become a stranger. Marcus opened the door before I could knock, his smile bright but somehow cold. "Dad, you made it." Marcus's voice carried that practiced enthusiasm he used with his business clients. He hugged me briefly, and I caught the scent of expensive cologne masking something sharper underneath. The foyer stretched above us like a cathedral, all white marble and crystal chandeliers. Everything gleamed with the kind of perfection that made my calloused hands feel dirty just by existing here. "Everyone's in the dining room," Marcus said, his hand on my shoulder guiding me forward like I might get lost in his own house. I followed him through hallways lined with family photos. Recent ones, mostly. Pictures of Marcus and Sarah at charity galas, vacation resorts, business awards ceremonies. I searched for my face among them, but found only empty spaces where a father should have been. The dining room hummed with conversation and the clink of real silverware against fine china. Relatives I hadn't seen in months looked up with surprise. "Look who finally made it," my sister Linda called out, her voice carrying that familiar edge of judgment. "We were starting to think you forgot about us." I forced a smile and took the empty chair at the far end of the table. The seat felt deliberately placed, like an afterthought squeezed in for politeness rather than welcome. Marcus moved to the head of the table, tapping his wine glass with a silver knife. The room gradually quieted, all attention turning to him like he was some kind of king holding court. "Before we eat," he began, his voice warm and confident, "I want to take a moment to talk about family. About taking care of the people we love." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. I gripped my water glass, the condensation slipping between my fingers like the grip I was losing on this moment. Marcus's smile widened as he looked directly at me. "I'm proud to provide my father with a comfortable retirement. Dad loves his $7,500 monthly pension I provide. It's the least I can do for the man who raised me." The words hit me like a physical blow. $7,500. Monthly. I sat frozen, watching relatives nod approvingly, their faces glowing with admiration for my son's generosity. "That's so wonderful, Marcus," Sarah's mother gushed. "Not many children take such good care of their parents these days." My throat closed completely. The truth burned inside me like acid. I hadn't received a single penny from Marcus in over 2 years. Not since that last insulting $500 with a note telling me to make it stretch. While they praised him, I remembered last night's shift. 12 hours on my feet, guarding an empty office building for minimum wage, just so I could afford this week's groceries. The silence around me grew heavy as conversations continued, the lie hanging in the air like poison. I stared at my water glass, watching condensation drip onto the pristine white tablecloth. Each drop felt like another piece of my dignity dissolving. Marcus has always been so responsible, Uncle Ted was saying, raising his wine glass. $7,500 a month? That's real love right there. My hands started trembling, not from nerves, but from the weight of memories crashing down. Last Tuesday night, standing in the rain outside a warehouse at 3 a.m., my security guard uniform soaked through because I couldn't afford to replace the broken zipper. The night before that, choosing between my blood pressure medication and groceries, deciding I could skip the pills for another week. "How does it feel, Robert?" Linda asked, her voice cutting through my thoughts. "Having such a generous son?" All eyes turned to me. The question hung in the air like a trap, waiting for me to step into it. Marcus watched me with that same cold smile, confident I would play along with his performance. After all, I always had before. When he missed my 65th birthday, when he didn't visit during my pneumonia, when he stopped returning my calls entirely. I opened my mouth, but no words came. How could I explain that his generous pension was a fantasy? That while he bragged about supporting me, I was surviving on instant noodles and hope? "Dad's always been humble about it," Marcus continued smoothly, interpreting my silence as agreement. "He tries to act like he doesn't need the help, but I insist. Family takes care of family, right, Dad?" The words were like daggers, each one twisting deeper. Family takes care of family. I thought about my tiny apartment with the heater that barely worked, the stack of overdue bills hidden in my kitchen drawer, the nights I went to bed hungry because I'd spent my last $10 on bus fare to get to work. Sarah beamed at her husband. "Marcus even wanted to increase it to 10,000, but you know how proud Robert is. He wouldn't hear of it." 10,000. The number floated around the table like some impossible dream. I made $750 every 2 weeks as a security guard. In a good month, with overtime, maybe $1,200. But 10,000? That was more than I'd seen in 6 months combined. "It must be nice," Sarah's sister Jennifer added, "knowing you're set for life." No worries about bills or anything. Set for life. The phrase would have been funny if it wasn't so cruel. Just yesterday, I'd called the electric company to beg for another extension. The woman on the phone had been kind, but firm. Pay by Friday or the lights go off. I'd scheduled an extra shift to cover it, working a double on Thanksgiving weekend. My throat felt like sandpaper. The room spun slightly, whether from hunger or shock, I couldn't tell. "Actually," I heard myself say, my voice cracking like old leather. "Actually, that's not true." The table fell silent. Forks stopped moving. Wine glasses paused halfway to lips. Marcus's face went white, then red, his eyes flashing a warning that said, "Don't you dare!" But I was past caring about his warnings, past caring about keeping his secrets. "I haven't received any money from Marcus in over 2 years, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "The last time he sent me anything, it was $500 with a note telling me to make it last." Linda's mouth fell open. Uncle Ted set down his wine glass with a sharp clink. "What Marcus doesn't tell you," I said, looking directly at Sarah, "is that I work as a security guard. 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, just to afford groceries." Sarah's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the marble floor. The crystal exploded like my son's lies, spreading across the pristine surface in 1,000 glittering pieces. "I'm 68 years old," I continued, my voice steady now, unstoppable. I stand on my feet all night watching empty buildings because my Social Security barely covers rent for a studio apartment. While Marcus tells you he gives me $7,000 a month, I'm deciding whether to buy medication or food. Marcus shot to his feet. Dad, you're confused. You're making everyone uncomfortable. No, I said quietly. You're the one making everyone uncomfortable, with your lies. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking, marking each second of my son's destroyed reputation. Sarah stared at Marcus like she was seeing him for the first time. Marcus? Her voice was barely a whisper. Is this true? Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He gets confused sometimes. Memory issues. You know how it is with older people. My memory is fine, I said calmly. I remember every detail of my last conversation with you, Marcus. 2 months ago, you told me you were too busy with important clients to help with my medical bills. I remember because I had to work 3 double shifts to pay for the tests myself. Uncle Ted cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should change the subject. Maybe we should talk about truth, I replied, reaching into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a folded paper, worn soft from handling. This is my pay stub from last week, 48 hours at $9.50 an hour. After taxes, $412. I set it on the table next to Marcus's expensive centerpiece. The contrast was brutal. His world of crystal and silver, my world of night shifts and poverty. While my son tells you he's generous, I'm wearing the same work uniform 3 days in a row because I can't afford to wash it more often. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes filling with tears. Marcus's perfect Thanksgiving dinner lay in ruins around us, just like his carefully constructed lies. I stood up slowly, my legs shaky, but my resolve solid as steel. The room remained frozen in stunned silence as I gathered my coat from the back of my chair. Robert, wait, Sarah called out, her voice breaking. Please, let's talk about this. I turned to look at her, this woman who had believed in her husband's generosity for years. Her face was pale, mascara smudged from tears she was trying not to shed. There's nothing to talk about, Sarah. You know the truth now. Marcus stepped forward, his face twisted with rage and panic. Dad, you're making a mistake. Think about what you're doing. I've been thinking for 2 years, I replied quietly. While I worked nights in the cold, I had plenty of time to think. The drive home felt like traveling between 2 different worlds. From Marcus's mansion, with its golden lights and marble floors, back to my neighborhood where streetlights flickered and potholes marked every block. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I had finally spoken the truth. After years of protecting Marcus's reputation, of staying silent while he built his image on my suffering, I had shattered his lies in front of everyone who mattered to him. But now what? The truth was out, but it felt hollow. Empty, like winning a war where everyone lost. I pulled into my apartment complex, the security light casting harsh shadows across cracked pavement. My Honda looked right at home here, among the other old cars and broken dreams. Inside my tiny apartment, sleep was impossible. The confrontation replayed in my mind like a broken record. Sarah's shocked face, Uncle Ted's uncomfortable silence, Marcus's desperate lies about my memory issues. I sat at my small kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence of my real life. Stacks of bills marked overdue in red ink. Pay stubs showing wages that barely covered basic survival. Bank statements with balances that never climbed above 3 digits. Something drove me to organize it all. to lay out the proof of Marcus's deception like pieces of a puzzle. I pulled out a cardboard box from under my bed, filled with documents I'd been too ashamed to look at closely. My hands trembled as I found old family photos mixed in with the papers. Pictures from better times, when Marcus was young and I thought our relationship meant something. Birthday parties where I was present. Christmas mornings when he actually seemed happy to see me. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. A printed email, dated 6 months ago. The header showed it was from Marcus to his business partner, David Chen. The subject line read, "Family Values Marketing Campaign." I read the message with growing horror. "David, I think we should emphasize my commitment to family in the new brochures. I take care of my elderly father completely, providing him with a comfortable retirement. It shows potential clients that I understand responsibility and long-term planning. Family values sell in this market. The story about my monthly support for Dad always gets great reactions at networking events." My hands shook as I photographed the email with my old phone. Marcus had been using my imaginary pension as a marketing tool, selling his fake generosity to clients while I struggled to afford basic necessities. I kept digging through the box, finding more evidence of the systematic lies Marcus had been telling. A Christmas card from last year where he'd written about supporting the family to his college friends. Social media screenshots I'd printed out months ago, showing him posting about taking care of those who took care of us. Each piece of evidence was another knife in my chest. While I worked double shifts and skipped meals, my son was building his reputation on fabricated generosity. The worst discovery came when I found bank records from 2 years ago. The last real money Marcus had sent me, $500 with a transaction note that read, "Final payment. Make it last." Final payment. Like I was some contractor he could dismiss when the project was over. I spread everything across my table like a detective working a case. Pay stubs showing my actual income, medical bills I couldn't afford, photos of my tiny apartment with its broken heater and peeling paint. The email proving Marcus was using my poverty as his marketing advantage. My phone buzzed with an angry text from Marcus. "Dad, we need to talk. You've embarrassed the entire family. Call me." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. For years, I'd answered his calls, accepted his excuses, protected his image. Not anymore. I found my notebook and started writing down everything I could remember. Every lie Marcus had told about supporting me. Every time someone praised his generosity while I struggled. Every detail of the fake pension story he'd been spreading. The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus hadn't just neglected me. He'd actively profited from the lie of taking care of me. By dawn, my kitchen table looked like a war room. Documents organized in neat piles, photos labeled with dates, a timeline of Marcus's deception written in my careful handwriting. I made coffee with the last grounds in my container, too tired to care that it tasted like dishwater. The exhaustion felt different now. Not the bone-deep weariness of working too many hours for too little pay, but the focused tiredness of someone who finally had a purpose. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Jerry Morrison, my old friend from the factory days, now a retired lawyer who sometimes helped people in the neighborhood with legal questions. "Robert?" I heard about what happened at Marcus's dinner. Linda called me this morning. "Jerry." I leaned back in my chair, surprised to feel relief at hearing a friendly voice. "Son, I think you need to know something. What Marcus has been doing, using your situation for business advantage while not actually helping you, that might be fraud. If he's claimed tax deductions or used the story to gain clients under false pretenses, we might have a real case." I looked at the email printout, Marcus's words about family values marketing, stark black ink on white paper. I have evidence, I said quietly. Emails, social media posts, documentation of my actual financial situation. Good. Can you come by my office tomorrow? Bring everything you have. After I hung up, I photographed every document, every piece of evidence, storing them safely in my phone. The truth was no longer just my word against Marcus's lies. It was documented, dated, undeniable. I sat back and stared at my arsenal of truth, finally understanding that Marcus's own arrogance had given me the weapons I needed to fight back. The morning sun filtered through my thin curtains, casting long shadows across the organized evidence on my kitchen table. The sound of expensive tires on gravel broke the morning quiet. Through my window, I watched Marcus's silver BMW pull into the apartment complex like a shark entering shallow water. He stepped out wearing a perfectly pressed suit, his face dark with rage as he surveyed my building with obvious disgust. I didn't move from my chair. Let him come. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of my son's anger. His footsteps pounded up the external stairs, each step heavy with entitlement and fury. When he reached my door, he didn't knock. He pounded with his fist like he was trying to break it down. "Dad, open this door right now." I sipped my coffee slowly, letting him wait. The pounding continued, growing more aggressive. Other apartment doors cracked open as neighbors peered out to see what was causing the commotion. Finally, I stood and unlocked the door, opening it just wide enough to see his furious face. Marcus pushed past me without invitation, his expensive cologne failing to mask the smell of desperation. He stood in my tiny living room like a giant in a dollhouse, his eyes scanning the organized papers on my table with growing alarm. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he snarled, spinning to face me. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" "Sarah's been crying all night. Her parents are asking questions. Uncle Ted called this morning wanting explanations." I closed the door calmly and turned to face him. "I told the truth. Something you seem to have forgotten how to do." "Truth?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The truth is you're a bitter old man who can't accept that I've moved on with my life. The truth is you're jealous of my success." He stepped closer, towering over me, using his height as intimidation. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call everyone from yesterday and tell them you were confused, that you had some kind of episode." "No," I said simply. The word hung between us like a challenge. Marcus's face went red, then purple. "No," he repeated, as if he couldn't believe I'd spoken. "Let me make this crystal clear," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "If you continue this pathetic attention-seeking behavior, if you embarrass me one more time, you'll get nothing. Zero. When I die, when Sarah and I have children, you won't exist in our wills." He gestured around my apartment with disgust. "You think this is bad? Keep talking, and it'll get worse. I can make sure you never see another penny from this family." I looked at him steadily. "What family, Marcus? The one where you've been lying about supporting me for 2 years? The one where you use my poverty as your marketing tool?" His eyes flickered with surprise, then narrowed. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I have the emails," I said quietly. "The ones to David Chen about using our family values to sell your business. The social media posts about taking care of those who took care of you. All while I work night shifts at 68 years old." Marcus's confident mask slipped completely. For a moment, I saw genuine fear in his eyes before it hardened back into rage. "You're not family," he spat. "You're just an old man who taught me what I didn't want to become." Poor, weak, invisible. The words hit their target, designed to wound where Marcus knew I was most vulnerable. But instead of breaking me, they clarified something that had been building since yesterday. You're right, I said calmly. I am poor. I do work a job most people half my age wouldn't take, but I'm not invisible anymore, and I'm definitely not weak. I walked to my table and picked up the folder containing all my evidence. Marcus's eyes followed it like it was a loaded gun. Your mother died believing you were a good man, I continued. She would be ashamed of what you've become. Using her husband's suffering to build your reputation while he struggles to survive. Marcus lunged forward, trying to grab the folder, but I pulled it back. Those papers prove nothing, he said desperately. It's your word against mine. Who's going to believe a confused old security guard over a successful businessman? We'll see, I replied. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, perhaps recognizing that the father he thought he could intimidate was gone. In his place stood someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain from the truth. He stormed toward the door, then turned back with one final threat. This isn't over. The door slammed behind him, rattling my windows but not my resolve. I stood in the sudden silence, listening to Marcus's BMW roar to life and screech out of the parking lot like a wounded animal fleeing. My hands weren't shaking anymore. If anything, his threats had crystallized something inside me. For too long, I'd been afraid of losing what little I had. Now I understood I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. I called Jerry's office, my fingers steady as I dialed. Morrison Legal Services. This is Jerry. It's Robert. Can you see me today? Marcus just left my apartment. He made threats about inheritance, tried to intimidate me into retracting everything. Son of a bitch, Jerry muttered. That's exactly what I was afraid of. Can you be here in an hour? And bring everything you showed me in those photos. Jerry's office occupied the ground floor of an old building downtown, wedged between a pawn shop and a tax preparation service. The waiting room smelled like coffee and old legal books, a far cry from the marble and crystal of Marcus's world. But it felt honest. Real. Jerry emerged from his office looking like he'd stepped out of a 1970s courtroom drama. Rumpled suit, thick glasses, and a briefcase that had seen better decades. But his mind was sharp as a razor, and his reputation for helping ordinary people against powerful opponents was legendary in our neighborhood. Robert, he said, shaking my hand with genuine warmth. Let's see what we're working with. I spread my evidence across his conference table. Bank statements, pay stubs, the devastating marketing email, screenshots of social media posts. Jerry studied each piece with the intensity of a surgeon examining X-rays. This is better than I hoped, he said finally. Much better. Jerry picked up the marketing email, adjusting his glasses. This email to David Chen is gold, Robert. Marcus explicitly states he's using your situation for business advantage. If he's gained clients or contracts based on this false narrative, that's fraud. If he's claimed tax deductions for supporting you while not actually providing support, that's tax fraud. I leaned forward. What does that mean exactly? It means we have grounds for a civil case, potentially criminal charges if the fraud is extensive enough. Jerry pulled out a yellow legal pad and began taking notes. But more importantly, it gives us leverage. Marcus built his reputation on a lie. When that lie gets exposed publicly, professionally, it'll destroy everything he's worked for. Jerry's phone rang. He glanced at the caller, ID, and smiled. Perfect timing. This is my nephew, Mike. He's an investigative journalist with the local business journal. Mike? Jerry Morrison. I've got a story you might be interested in. Local businessman using elderly father's poverty as marketing tool while father works security guard jobs to survive. He paused, listening. Yes, that Marcus Chen from Chen Development. The same one who just won the Community Service Award. My stomach tightened. Jerry, I'm not sure about involving the press. Jerry covered the phone. Trust me, Robert. Marcus threatened you with his reputation and connections. Time to show him that the truth has its own power. He returned to the call. Can you meet us this afternoon? I'll have documentation. Another pause. Excellent. See you at 3. Jerry hung up and turned to me with the first genuine smile I'd seen in days. Mike's been looking for a story about business ethics in the development community. Apparently, Marcus has made quite a few enemies with his aggressive tactics and holier-than-thou public persona. You mean we're not alone in this? Son, you're about to discover just how many people have been waiting for Marcus's mask to slip. Jerry made 3 more calls while I sat in his office, each one revealing another crack in Marcus's perfect facade. A client who'd been overcharged and then publicly shamed when he complained. A subcontractor who'd been stiffed on payment while Marcus donated publicly to charity. A former business partner who'd been squeezed out after Marcus took credit for their joint successes. The beautiful thing about arrogant people, Jerry explained as he hung up from the last call, is they always make enemies. They think their success makes them untouchable, but it just means more people are watching when they fall. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mr. Robert, this is Maria Santos from your security company. I heard about what happened. Can we talk? Maria was my supervisor, a tough woman in her 40s who'd always treated me with respect despite the age difference. I called her back immediately. Robert, honey, I'm so sorry. When I heard what your son's been telling people while you're working doubles just to make rent, it made me sick. Maria, I don't want to drag the company into this. Are you kidding? You're the hardest worker we have. Half our clients specifically request you because they trust you. I've got 3 managers who want to write character references, and our district supervisor wants to document your work record for the past 2 years. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The warm support of people who actually knew my worth. There's more, Maria continued. Remember that charity drive last month? The one where your son's company was supposed to match employee donations? They never sent the money. We've got documentation. The shelter's still waiting for the promised funds. Jerry was writing furiously on his legal pad, his eyes bright with the thrill of building an ironclad case. Maria, can you have those references ready by tomorrow? Already typing them up. Robert, it's time people knew who you really are. By 5 p.m., Jerry's conference table looked like mission control for a major operation. Character references from my coworkers, documentation of my actual work schedule and wages, proof of Marcus's unfulfilled charity promises, screenshots of his social media posts about family values, and at the center of it all, that damning marketing email. Robert, Jerry said, leaning back in his chair, in 30 years of practice, I've rarely seen a case this clear-cut. Marcus didn't just lie about supporting you. He's built an entire business persona around fabricated generosity. While you struggled in poverty, he could have easily alleviated. The investigative journalist, Mike Harrison, had arrived an hour earlier. Young, energetic, with the kind of sharp questions that would make Marcus sweat. He'd taken copies of everything and promised a thorough investigation. The business community article comes out Friday, Mike explained, but I'm also pitching this to the television stations. Human interest story about a son profiting from his father's poverty while the father works night shifts just to survive. It's the kind of story that goes viral. I thought about Marcus's threat that morning. Who's going to believe a confused old security guard over a successful businessman? Everyone, Jerry said firmly, because you have what Marcus doesn't, the truth. And the truth has its own power. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Sarah. Robert, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Can we meet tomorrow? There are things about Marcus I need to tell you. I showed the message to Jerry. His smile was predatory. Your daughter-in-law wants to talk. That's either very good news for us or very bad news for Marcus. I looked at the evidence spread across the table. the alliance of people who'd rallied to support me, the plan that was taking shape to expose Marcus's lies completely. For the first time in years, I felt powerful, not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally had the tools to demand justice. Sarah's text about having things to tell me pulsed on my phone screen like a heartbeat. By morning, the ripple effect had begun. My phone rang constantly with relatives calling to express shock and support. Cousin Linda, who'd been at the dinner, called first. "Robert, I feel terrible. I had no idea Marcus was lying about everything. When I think about how we all praised him while you were struggling." Her voice broke. "How can we help?" Uncle Ted called next, his gruff voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Son, I've been thinking about that dinner all night. Something never felt right about Marcus's stories. Too perfect, you know? Real generosity doesn't need such a big stage." The family network that had once amplified Marcus's lies was now spreading the truth just as quickly. Word spread beyond family into Marcus's carefully cultivated business community. Jerry called with updates every hour. "Mike's article gets published tomorrow, but rumors are already flying," Jerry reported. "3 of Marcus's clients have called asking if the stories about his father are true. His charity board wants an emergency meeting about the unfulfilled donation promises." At the security company, my co-workers rallied around me with fierce loyalty. Maria had organized character references from 12 different people: security guards, janitors, and night shift workers who knew the reality of scraping by on minimum wage. "Robert," Maria said when she brought the completed references, "your story is our story. Every one of us knows what it's like to choose between groceries and medicine. What Marcus did to you, using your struggle for his gain, it's disgusting." The working-class community that Marcus dismissed as invisible was becoming visible, unified, and angry on my behalf. Sarah arrived at my apartment that evening, her expensive car looking as out of place as Marcus's BMW had the day before. But unlike her husband, she knocked gently and waited for permission to enter. She sat across from me at my kitchen table, her eyes red from crying. "Robert, I need to tell you about our finances. Things Marcus has been hiding from everyone, including me." She pulled out bank statements and credit card bills. "We're not as wealthy as Marcus pretends. He's been living on credit for months, borrowing against future projects. The mansion has a second mortgage. The cars are leased. Even his clothes are bought with credit cards." My hands trembled as I looked at the debt amounts. "Sarah, why are you showing me this?" "Because while he was telling everyone he was giving you thousands, he was secretly borrowing money to maintain his image. He chose his reputation over your survival. Sarah's revelations added the final piece to our growing case. Marcus wasn't just cruel, he was financially desperate. His entire image was built on borrowed money and fabricated generosity." "There's going to be a family meeting," Sarah continued. "Marcus is panicking about the rumors spreading. He wants to gather everyone together to set the record straight about his side of the story." Jerry had prepared me for this moment. "Let him call the meeting," he'd advised. "Arrogant people always try to control the narrative when they're cornered. That's when they make their biggest mistakes." I looked at Sarah, this woman who'd believed in her husband's lies and was now facing the truth of their financial house of cards. "When is this meeting?" I asked. "Tomorrow night, at the community center. He's invited everyone from Thanksgiving dinner, plus some of his business associates. He thinks he can spin this back in his favor." I smiled for the first time in days. Marcus was walking straight into the trap we'd been preparing, bringing witnesses to his own downfall. The community center meeting room felt like a courtroom, and tonight would be his trial. Jerry arrived at my apartment an hour before the meeting, carrying a leather briefcase that had seen countless legal battles. "You ready for this, Robert?" I looked at the folder containing months of evidence, character references from my coworkers, and Sarah's financial revelations. I've been ready for 2 years. The community center buzzed with tension when we arrived. Marcus had invited everyone from Thanksgiving dinner, plus several business associates and potential clients. He'd even brought David Chen, his business partner who'd received that damning marketing email. Marcus stood at the front of the room in his most expensive suit, projecting confidence despite the sweat beading on his forehead. His smile looked painted on, brittle around the edges. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began, his voice carrying that practiced authority he used in business presentations. "I know there's been some confusion about my relationship with my father. Some misunderstandings that need to be cleared up." He gestured toward me, sitting in the back row with Jerry. "Dad's been having some memory issues lately. Getting confused about finances, making up stories. It's actually quite common with elderly people." Several family members shifted uncomfortably. Uncle Ted crossed his arms and frowned. "The truth is," Marcus continued, "I've been quietly supporting my father for years. Not $7,000 like I mentioned at dinner, that was an exaggeration to spare his dignity. But I've been helping with groceries, utilities, small amounts to supplement his income." I felt Jerry's hand on my arm, a gentle reminder to stay calm and let Marcus dig his own grave deeper. Marcus pulled out a folder of his own. "I have bank records here showing regular transfers to my father's account. Small amounts, because Dad's proud and doesn't like accepting help." He was smooth. I had to give him that, admitting to exaggeration while maintaining the core lie. But Jerry had prepared me for exactly this strategy. Sarah sat in the front row, her face pale as she watched her husband weave his web of calculated deceptions. Marcus finished his presentation with that confident smile that had fooled people for years. "I hope this clears up any confusion. My father means the world to me, and I'd never let him struggle alone." Polite applause rippled through the room. Some people looked relieved to have an explanation that preserved their image of Marcus as a caring son. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, standing slowly. "That was quite a performance." The room fell silent. Marcus's smile flickered. "Now let me share the actual truth," I continued, walking to the front of the room. Jerry handed me the first piece of evidence. "This is my bank statement from last month," I said, holding it up for everyone to see. "You'll notice there are no deposits from Marcus. None. The only income shown is from my security guard job." I placed it on the table next to Marcus's fabricated records. "Here's my pay stub from last week. 48 hours at $9.50 an hour. That's my entire income." Marcus's face went red. "Dad, please. You're embarrassing yourself." "Here's what's embarrassing," I replied calmly, pulling out the printed email. This message from Marcus to his business partner, David Chen, dated 6 months ago. "David, you're here tonight. Would you like me to read it aloud?" David Chen's face went white. He clearly remembered the email and where this was heading. I read Marcus's words slowly, clearly. "I think we should emphasize my commitment to family in the new brochures. I take care of my elderly father completely, providing him with a comfortable retirement. It shows potential clients that I understand responsibility and long-term planning. Family values sell in this market." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Marcus lunged forward, trying to grab the paper. "That's taken out of context," he shouted, his composed mask finally cracking. "Here's the context," I said, stepping back. "While you were using my poverty as your marketing tool, I was working 12-hour night shifts to afford groceries." I pulled out photographs of my tiny apartment, my security guard uniform, my medicine bottles with warning labels about skipped doses. "This is what your comfortable retirement actually looks like." Sarah stood up suddenly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Stop lying, Marcus. Just stop." Every head turned toward her. Marcus looked at his wife with desperate panic. "I've seen our real financial records," Sarah announced, her voice shaking but determined. "We're drowning in debt. Credit cards maxed out. Second mortgage on the house. You've been borrowing money to maintain this image while your father worked security jobs." She pulled out the bank statements she'd shown me earlier. "These are our actual finances. We don't have money to give anyone. Marcus has been living a complete lie." Marcus's business associates exchanged alarmed glances. David Chen stood up abruptly. "Marcus, is this true? Have you been fabricating your family situation for business advantage?" "David, please, let me explain." But David was already heading for the exit. "The Chen Development Partnership is over. I can't be associated with this level of deception." The room began to unravel as Marcus's carefully constructed world collapsed in real time. His charity board members huddled together, discussing emergency meetings. Potential clients gathered their coats and headed for the door. "Wait!" Marcus shouted desperately. "You're all overreacting. This is family business." "No," I said quietly, but my voice carried in the sudden silence. "This is fraud. You used my suffering to build your reputation and gain clients under false pretenses." Jerry stepped forward, his briefcase open. "I'm Jerry Morrison, representing Mr. Robert Chen. We have documented evidence of systematic fraud, including tax implications if Marcus has claimed deductions for support he never provided." Marcus's face cycled through panic, rage, and finally, cornered desperation. "You can't prove any of this legally," he snarled, all pretense of the caring son finally gone. "It's his word against mine." "Actually," Jerry smiled, "we have 12 character witnesses from Robert's workplace, financial records spanning 2 years, and your own emails, admitting to using fabricated family stories for business gain." The trap had sprung completely. Marcus stood alone at the front of the room, his reputation in ruins, his business partnerships dissolving, his marriage crumbling, all because his own arrogance had provided the evidence for his downfall. Marcus looked around the room desperately, searching for a single supportive face. He found none. Even his closest relatives avoided his eyes, ashamed to be associated with his deception. "This is insane," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm a successful businessman. I've donated to charity. I've built a reputation in this community." "Built on lies," Uncle Ted said bluntly, standing up. "Using your father's poverty while he worked night shifts at 68 years old. That's not success, Marcus. That's cruelty." Linda nodded in agreement. "We all praised you for being such a generous son." Meanwhile, Robert was choosing between medicine and food. The community Marcus had courted so carefully was turning against him with the same energy they'd once used to praise him. Mike Harrison, the journalist, had been quietly taking notes in the corner. Now he stood up. "Mr. Chen, I'm Mike Harrison from the Business Journal. I have a few questions about your marketing practices and charitable commitments." Marcus's panic reached full crescendo. "I don't have to answer any questions." "Actually," Jerry interjected, "given the potential fraud implications, you might want to start answering some questions." "This won't end here." I watched my son's complete meltdown with a mixture of sadness and relief. Not because I enjoyed his suffering, but because the truth was finally, completely out. "Robert," Marcus said, turning to me with desperate eyes. "Dad, please. We can work this out. I'll start sending you money. Real money this time." "It's too late for that," I replied quietly. "This was never about the money, Marcus. It was about the truth." The room began to empty as people filed out, shaking their heads and whispering among themselves. Marcus's world was crumbling in real time, and everyone wanted to distance themselves from the debris. Sarah approached me as the crowd thinned. "Robert, I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. I can't live with someone who could watch you suffer while lying about helping you." Marcus stood alone at the front of the empty room, his expensive suit wrinkled, his perfect image destroyed by his own arrogance and cruelty. The truth had won, completely and irreversibly. I woke up the next morning to my phone buzzing with notifications I'd never expected to receive. Texts of support from family members, voice messages from co-workers checking on me, even a call from the manager of my apartment complex, who'd heard about the meeting and wanted to tell me my rent could wait another week if needed. Mike Harrison's article had published online at 6 a.m. The headline read, "Local businessman used father's poverty for marketing while father worked security to survive." By 8 a.m., it had been shared over 1,000 times on social media. The comment section was brutal for Marcus. "Disgusting. How do you sleep at night? This man should be in jail." But for me, the responses were overwhelmingly supportive. "This father is a hero. Real dignity doesn't need lies. Justice finally served." The truth was spreading faster than Marcus's lies ever had. Jerry called with updates throughout the morning. "Marcus's world is collapsing fast," he reported with grim satisfaction. "David Chen filed papers to dissolve their partnership. The charity board voted to remove him. 3 clients canceled contracts this morning." But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. "The IRS wants to meet with Marcus next week," Jerry continued. "Apparently, he's been claiming tax deductions for elderly parent support he never provided. That's criminal fraud, Robert." By noon, Marcus's business phone had been disconnected. His office building manager confirmed he'd been asked to vacate due to credibility concerns affecting other tenants. The community that had once celebrated Marcus as a success story now treated his name like a warning. Parents used his story to teach their children about the difference between real generosity and public performance. His reputation wasn't just damaged, it was toxic. Sarah called me that afternoon, her voice hollow with exhaustion. "Robert, I wanted you to know. I filed the divorce papers this morning. I can't live with someone who could watch you suffer while building his image on your pain." She paused, and I could hear her crying softly. "I keep thinking about all the times I bragged to my friends about how generous Marcus was to you. How I felt proud to be married to such a caring man. It makes me sick now." "Sarah, you didn't know." "But I should have. I should have asked to meet you more often, should have seen your actual living situation. I was so caught up in Marcus's version of reality that I never looked for the truth. The divorce would cost Marcus half of everything he'd borrowed to maintain his image. Assets that were already mortgaged would be split, leaving him with crushing debt and no income. By evening, Marcus had lost everything that mattered to his sense of self. Business gone, marriage over, reputation destroyed, community respect evaporated, criminal investigation pending. I should have felt satisfied, vindicated, triumphant. Instead, I felt oddly empty. Jerry stopped by my apartment with takeout Chinese food. "You did it, Robert. Complete victory." "It doesn't feel like victory," I admitted, picking at my lo mein. "It feels like watching a building collapse. Necessary, maybe, but not celebratory." "That's because you're not cruel like he was," Jerry said. "You wanted justice, not destruction. The destruction was Marcus's choice when he built his life on lies." My phone buzzed with another apologetic text from Marcus. His 15th one today, each more desperate than the last, begging for forgiveness, promising to change, offering the money he claimed he'd always been giving me. But some truths, once revealed, can never be hidden again. Some trust, once broken so completely, can never be rebuilt. I deleted the message without reading it fully and turned off my phone. That was 6 months ago. Today, I'm sitting in a real dining room again, surrounded by laughter and genuine warmth. But this time it's honest. Mariah from the security company carved the turkey while her husband told stories about their grandchildren. Jerry brought his famous cornbread stuffing. Sarah, now officially divorced and rebuilding her life, helped serve vegetables she'd grown in her new apartment's small garden. This was our chosen family Thanksgiving. No lies, no performances, just people who'd decided to care about each other honestly. The Community Support Fund had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Local businesses, touched by my story, contributed enough for me to reduce my security hours to part-time. I still worked, but now by choice, rather than desperation. My tiny apartment had been transformed with small gifts from friends, a comfortable chair from the church ladies, a heater that actually worked from my co-workers, plants from Sarah that turned my windowsill into something alive and hopeful. I'd learned to accept help without shame, understanding finally that real family supports each other through truth, not through lies told to others. Marcus still sent occasional messages. The criminal investigation had resulted in probation and community service rather than jail time, but his professional life remained in ruins. He'd moved to a different state, trying to rebuild under a cloud of Google search results that would follow him forever. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate required too much energy, and I'd discovered I preferred spending my energy on people who deserved it. When his messages came, I felt only a distant sadness for the son I'd thought I had, and quiet gratitude for the family I'd actually found. As dinner wound down, and friends shared what they were thankful for, Maria asked me to speak. I looked around the table at faces that had chosen to know my truth and love me anyway. At Sarah, who'd found the courage to leave a life built on lies. At Jerry, who'd fought for justice without expecting payment. At co-workers who'd become family simply because they'd seen my worth when my own son couldn't. I thought I lost a son, I said quietly, but I learned I never really had one. What I gained was worth more than any lie could ever be. Family isn't about blood, it's about truth.